So I want to talk about income inequality and education. We started talking about education. So I've spent almost a decade working in underserved communities. And I always hear these numbers that the US spends more per student than any other country in the world. And I walk into these classrooms that look like third world countries 5 miles from Beverly Hills. Now, the idea of coming to America and the American dream of, if you're given the opportunity, you can make it happen, pull yourself up from your bootstraps and make it work. How are you supposed to make it work when you don't even have boots, let alone straps?
There you go. You've had it. You hit the nail on the head right there. Because that's the problem, is lack of opportunity, and we've taken it away from young people. And it's so true, because as we know, there are schools who, and by the way, the per pupil spending of schools, public schools in America, the per pupil spending is based primarily on property taxes. It's a complicated formula with some money coming from the federal government, some from the state, a lot of it from the local property taxes. But overall, it's driven by property taxes. So the areas in which the properties are worth more, because the parents are more affluent, the homes are worth more dollars come in the property taxes. The other areas where there's less homes that are worth more, there are homes like most people are renters or homes that are low value homes in terms of financial value. There's less money coming into those school districts. Let me give you some numbers. Southgate, one of the lower income areas, their per pupil spending today is about $7,500 per student. Whereas Marin County, one of the most expensive affluent areas in California, their per pupil spending is $18,000 per student. In Long Beach, it's $9,000 per student. Palo Alto, $14,000. Look at the disparities within our own state and our areas compared also between states. In New York, the per pupil spending is $17,000 per student. In California, it's about $9,000. That is a huge disparity. It goes against the American concept of the American dream and equal opportunity. And you lived it. You know the schools, and I've been to them myself. Schools where there are sometimes, I have a friend who teaches in a school in Inglewood, and she told me there are actually cockroaches crawling on the floor where her high school students in the class have to sit on the floor because not enough desks to sit on. What about the textbooks that are outdated in many schools across America? Way outdated.
Well, I'll give you an example of that. I was working in an after-school program in Watts. Yeah. The kids weren't allowed to take their school books home because they only had one in the budget.
Yes. That's
so do you know what the teachers say? Look it up. Look up the answer online.
Look at that. That's horrible. And some schools have 2 sets of textbooks.
Yeah.
Newport Beach, I'm sure, has 2 sets. I know that Beverly Hills does, and Marin does. Yeah, and iPads, exactly. So this is the disparity of the tools. The most poignant difference was 2 schools that Jonathan Kozol wrote about, called Savage Inequalities in his work, Savage Inequalities, the State of American Education. Jonathan Kozol went to visit schools in Cincinnati, Ohio. One school had, the school had leaky roofs. The water was dropping on the cello strings of the band, and the girl couldn't even keep the music straight. And the kids had to go outside to use the bathroom, so they had to put their jackets on in the middle of horrendous winter and storms. The school down the street was state of the art. They had the iPads, the pastel walls, all the library books. Now the baseball teams were where the contrast really lay. The baseball team from the lower income school had 3-finger gloves hand-me-down over a period of 60 years. 3-finger gloves that Ty Cobb used to use 80 years ago. The other school had the latest equipment, and they were playing the same game against each other. Talk about inequality of tools, and yet you know what the Talmud says, the Talmud commented on an ancient Chinese proverb. It goes like this: if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. You teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And that's the thing. How in the world can you do that? What we're doing to our kids today is not teaching them how to fish, not giving them equal opportunity, or not even giving them a fishing rod to be able to learn how to fish. But it's absolutely unacceptable to allow 1/5 of our children in America to go to bed hungry sometime during the month in the country that produces food for the world.
What does it look like day to day to live on minimum wage with a family?
Well, it looks like you go home and you're not sure where your next meal is coming from. How are you going to shop at the grocery store to make ends meet? So you cut corners, you buy the least expensive food, quite often which is not healthy, processed food, GMO foods that are mass produced, and you're feeding your kids this not because you want to, but because you have to. And it also means, how are you going to make the ends meet for rent next month? Am I going to buy my prescription drugs which I need for medicine, or cut back on that and go pay the rent? This is everyday struggle, Adam, and it really can be trying on the human spirit. It's got to be depressing, getting people to be depressed. And you can see some of the results of that. More and more mental health problems. We have stress. You have young people neglected because parents are barely able to survive this. And the young people themselves are stressed out. And another thing is the psychological aspect. What is the young person? I talked about that school a little while ago in Cincinnati, right? The school with the 3-finger gloves, old gloves, and the baseball team. What do those kids think about themselves when they see themselves having to use 3-finger gloves that are 60 years old, By the way, the textbook in that school said, we're going to put a man on the moon in the future, the near future.
Yeah.
That's how old they were. And yet the other kids are playing against, down the street in a more affluent district, they have the latest state-of-the-art equipment. What are these young people thinking? And by the way, that was both those schools were predominantly white European American.
You know, you mentioned it many times, and it's all over the news. We all see it. Rich getting richer, poor getting poorer, disappearing. The middle class is disappearing. Yes. What happens if we continue down this route?
And we know that when that's happened historically, and it's happening today, to the tune of 9% of the American middle class has shrunk. The entire middle class in America in the last 15 years has shrunk by 9%, literally, in terms of income, what they bring in. The median income in the United States used to be $56,000 a year, just about 15 years ago. It is now $51,000 a year. When a student graduates from college with a bachelor's degree today, they can expect to make beginning salary $35,000 a year. 15 years ago it was $50,000 a year. So we know what's going on with that disappearing middle class. And the dire consequences are just incredible what will happen, because we know what happened in countries such as France in 1789, when the rich got so rich they were so out of touch, and the poor were storming the gates with not enough food and bread to eat. And Marie Antoinette allegedly said, if they don't have bread, let them get a recipe for cake. She thought anyone can do this if they wanted to.
GMO cake, probably.
Yeah, right, GMO cake, exactly.